那我们再来看迈克尔·哈森这个第3讲的第5小段，它这个标题呢是冷战打破了金融资本的稳定体系。这个里边有一个道理，希望大家了解，就是冷战呢其实是在2战即将结束的时候就已经初步形成的结构，也就是说美苏2个军事强国分割这个世界的势力范围，这是在2战后期就已经初步形成了。在形成这个之后，那发起冷战谁发起的呢？当然是美国。那美国为什么他说这个事情会有这么重大的这个意义，对整个金融资本的这个体系都会有改变呢？是因为苏联这个带领的这个整个东欧社会主义阵营，当然也包括1950年因为朝鲜战争也被打入苏联阵营的中国，那都是以马克思主义来作为一个基本的指导思想的这些国家。那马克思主义呢，他曾经提出呢这个商品货币关系的分析，并且呢指出金融资本的腐朽的本性。金融资本是寄生的呀，它并不产生任何增加值啊。按说金融资本就是作为它只应该是一个商品交换的中介，它自身并不产生利润，它只应该分享这个商品交换所体现的社会平均收益，这是原来的这个正常情况下的金融工具作用。但是一旦金融异化变成一个独立的力量，它就要追求的是什么呢？追求的是金融大大超过一般的产业经济的那个收益率。所以呢，苏东这个建立一个庞大的实体经济的体系，它就是不进入金融，它甚至就是它所生产出的大量的产品用计划方式调拨，以减少对货币的依赖，就它刻意的去金融化，所以它没有推进过经济的货币化。于是这个美元所形成的这个金融霸权，因为它对应黄金啊，所以叫美金呢。这个霸权只在这个世界的一半，也就是说由西方控制的这个体系中，它是有它的所谓金融霸权的，那它就客观上对另外一半不发挥作用。这世界有另外一半世界美元霸权没有作用。
The road to this new need to de-dollarize began in 1950 when the United States balance of payments moved steadily into deficit as a result of military spending in Korea and elsewhere in Asia. For the next 20 years, quarter century, the entire U.S. deficit was military in character. As I've mentioned before, the private sector, private trade and investment were exactly in balance. It was, when you talk about the balance of payments deficit that is putting gold in the foreign central bank reserves, these are entirely dollars spent by the U.S. military. So when you say that we're on a dollar standard or a treasury bill standard, it's on an American military standard. It's a military spending. And the objective is for America to make foreign countries to bear all of the costs of its foreign military spending across the world. That is the essence of the current international financial system, and that is exactly what's leading other countries that don't agree with these American policies to want to withdraw. Well, matters came to a head in the Vietnam War when matters became really serious by 1964 and 1975. I think, as I've mentioned before, every Friday, the Federal Reserve Board published statistics on the U.S. gold holdings, the degree to which U.S. paper currency was backed by the gold stock. And the legal backing was 25%, and the U.S. gold holdings that had been 25 billion were slowly declining towards the point where they no longer backed the paper currency, the dollar greenbacks in your pocket that are gold, and everyone was saying, well, something's got to give, something's got to end. Well, General de Gaulle of France was the most vocal in cashing in surplus dollars flowing in from its banks in Vietnam, Laos, and other foreign colonies. And there were few US banks. Chase Manhattan was asked to help solve this problem by setting up a branch in Saigon. and it was built like a fortress. It was not a business decision, but David Rockefeller wanted to be a patriotic citizen, so that he had taken over the bank from George Champion and agreed to help the U.S. war effort. Now, I was at Chase at that time as a balance of payments economist, and George Champion had been one of the most outspoken critics of the Vietnam War and its military spending. He said it was not fiscally responsible. So here again, you have Wall Street and finance capital disagreeing with America's Cold War strategy. So the Cold War became a military subjugation system that ended up breaking the finance capital stability system for purely military Cold War means. Quite frankly, Congress and the president and American voters and the American working class want to dominate other worlds militarily, and they want to put America first, and they are not internationalists. They are very strongly nationalist, and that's why Donald Trump is president. So political support for American military policy did not come from Wall Street. It came from the labor movement and from national security advocates, Southerners who still want to fight the Civil War. Now, in Europe, increasingly large political demonstrations were mounted against the war, as anti-Americanism mounted in response to all the atrocities that were reported: the My Lai massacre, the napalming of forests, the dropping of Agent Orange, poisoning Vietnam. There was a huge movement against the war. It was led by the middle class, by the financial class, by Wall Street, against the labor movement and against the right-wing working class. That's why President Johnson said, "I can't get rid of the war in Vietnam. The workers will never vote for Democratic if we don't continue the war. I'm doing it for the working class. I'm doing it for the voters. I'm doing it for the Democratic Party and its roots in the working class." It's necessary that foreign countries realize that this is really the internal domestic politics of the United States that underlie its aggressive foreign diplomacy. None of the war was good for civilian industry or for banking. And matters reached a crisis proportion in January 1965, when President Lyndon Johnson announced voluntary balance of payments controls. And US banks and US companies were told that they could not increase their foreign investment or foreign loan volume more than 5% more than the investments that they had at the end of 1964. So all of a sudden, business plans were disrupted. Oil industry, if the oil industry followed it, they would have to not invest more in Near Eastern oil and other countries' oil. Manufacturers could not build up their foreign affiliates, and this would hurt the balance of payments. And the business sector pointed out that what was called foreign investment didn't really constitute a dollar outflow. When oil companies invest abroad, what do? They send U.S. equipment from the United States to Saudi Arabia or elsewhere in the Near East. They send management. They lend money to the affiliates and charge interest. They take profits. None of these dollars that are spent on the foreign oil investment left the United States. It's as if U.S. oil investment in Saudi Arabia and the Near East were really part of the U.S. economy, not part of the Saudi Arabian economy. And in fact, oil industry, the oil wells were written on the books as branches of the parent company, and their operations were consolidated into the parent company balance sheet. They were not part of the foreign economy at all. So the oil industry asked Chase Manhattan to write a report showing that the oil industry did not really create a dollar outflow at all, and that Roosevelt was President Johnson was just being ignorantly militaristic and destructive of American imperialism by limiting the balance of payments. There was a discussion with the government. The government said, we don't, essentially, President Johnson's position is we're willing to shrink American industry. We're willing to prevent American banking from expanding just so that we can fight the war in Vietnam. And that's what the American people want. Well, of course, it's not what the American people wanted, because President Johnson was faced with huge protests and demonstrations everywhere that he would go. He would have to leave hotels through the toilets in the rear and sneak out of the hotels so that he wouldn't hear the mob yelling, hey, hey, LBJ, how many babies did you kill today? And there was a sigh of relief when Johnson realized that he'd become the most hated president in American history for being such a murderer, and decided to announce that he would step down. I was watching television at the time, and you could hear the cheers going up all through the neighborhood. Everyone was watching his press conference, and he announced he would not run. Finally, they cheered, hoping that the war could be over. Well, of course, it wasn't over, because you had Henry Kissinger and the ultra-right Russia haters that came in and prolonged it for more than 4 years. But there was a belief that at least finally there would be an ending of the war. And the business community said, finally, business can recover because the war is over. Well, what happened, in fact, was that Secretary of State Henry Kissinger hated Russia, hated communism, hated labor, loved rich people, and he extended the war to Laos, Cambodia. He said, his phrase was, bomb the enemy to the peace table. He said, if America can bomb enough countries, every country will be afraid to do anything that we don't tell them to do, because we'll use Laos and Cambodia as an example of how we can crush any country. We will drop napalm on you. We'll drop Agent Orange. We will poison your country if you do not obey the United States. President Nixon, when he was elected, took Kissinger on board from the governor Nelson Rockefeller of New York, where Kissinger had been an advisor from. So it's at this point that U.S. diplomats began to say, well, we're just about run out of gold. We're running out of gold quickly. They revived Keynes's idea for an international clearing union in the form of what they called special drawing rights to be issued by the International Monetary Fund. And the idea, finally, was to give other countries overdraft facilities in proportion to their IMF quotas, with the US having the largest quota, as I mentioned. The difference is that Keynes's plan aimed at financing economic recovery and expansion of European economies to create means of production, not military spending to destroy it in countries deemed to be US adversaries.
这就是客观上形成的一个冷战的这么一个叫做一个世界两个体系。这个两个体系互相之间的差异是非常显著的，在性质上是不同的。一个是金融资本霸权引领的货币经济体系，一个是实体经济为主要经济形态的去货币化的体系。因为你去金融化，没有金融的独立的利益，才能够使得所有的剩余全额进入产业资本的积累，提高资本积累率，才能加快工业化的完成。以中国为例，它长期以来就是一个农业国家，一个农民国家，连农业国家都不算，它只是农民国家，因为农民人口众多嘛。那它怎么能够进入工业化的呢？不外乎就是这样，把所有的全部的这个经济剩余都由国家去货币化条件下，由国家直接集中起来用于对产业资本的投入。所以那个时候是财政直接一本账管着全国的经济。金融所能够提供的人民币，其实它只是一个符号作用，它是被计划分配了的所有原材物料，乃至于生活物资、社会物资，都已经计划分配到位了，然后用货币作为一个交易的一个符号，但它并不是真的用货币来完成交易的，它是用计划票证来完成产品的分配的。所以这种体系，它就导致世界上金融资本霸权尽管形成，它对世界上大多数国家对它都是所谓债务国呀，美国是世界最大的债权国呀，但它对整个 苏联东欧体系，包括中国在内的这个体系呢，它不发挥作用。当然，也因为它进入金融资本，那边没有进入金融资本，甚至维持的整个实体经济非货币化。所以呢，当美国改造成 GDP 统计的时候，那 GDP 其实有大量的，其实这个 GDP 是有这个积极的，也有消极的呀，对吧？你比如说你把这个人在很差的环境条件下不断的得病，那得病就得去看病，看病就增加 GDP， 那看的病越多，那医药产业就不断的得增产，比如说那也是 GDP， 对吧？那同理，将你大量使用化学品，你把生态破坏了，然后虫害大量增加，你还得去生产剧毒农药，那也是 GDP。所以有黑色的 GDP， 有带血的 GDP， 有肮脏的 GDP。但是 GDP 一旦变成只计算增加值的时候，那些货币经济，它的增加值就大大的高于实体经济，于是就出现了大家看得到的这样一个经济竞争。经济竞争的客观结果呢，当然这个实体经济的按 GDP 算的这个增加值，就交易增加值没有那么快，没有那么大量。于是乎呢，当我刚才前面这个谈到的，就是美元在二战之后不仅形成了金融霸权，并且形成了知识霸权，也就是说它在思想上通过冷战意识形态，实际上已经控制了大多数国家的知识分子的思考能力。也就是当然也包括苏联东欧这些国家，他们的思考能力同样被控制。于是乎呢，大家就认为我们这个社会制度、政治制度不行，这就发生了重大变化。好了，那也恰恰是这个苏东的解体，巨大的实体经济、实体资产没有被货币化过，才造成了90年代。大家知道91年苏东解体，90年代西方经济出现了一个飞跃的增长。这个叫 booming economy， 它那个一下就起来了，简直就爆炸性的增长。怎么来的？其实就是那些实体经济的实体资产被货币化了。被什么呢？被美元呐、马克呀、英镑啊等等，被这些西方的硬通货把它货币化。当然，最大的占便宜的人是美国了。所以把这个东西纳入进来看，就知道了。到90年代以后，美元霸权才真正在世界上形成了金融霸权，并且以金融全球化来主导世界经济的这样的地位，是因为老冷战的结局，苏东解体带来的。好了，我们不多分析了，这个我们以前有很多讲座把这些内容都讲过了，大家可以上网去搜，来比较参照看看这个哈德森教授他在这个方面的分析。